We have Cosmo. I didn't think we'd ever actually see that again. We have some Earthbox, and, well, just more of your standard fun metagame contenders. Alright, to the 34% of you that have not smashed the ever-living crap out of that subscribe button, smash it so you guys don't miss out on more awesome content. So, yes, we have a working Cosmo deck. This deck actually went 4-0 at its event, and I really did look around here when I saw this info, and I was like, no way. Cosmo in the year 2023 actually doing something? Yeah, much to my surprise, I'm very happy to see that this is functionally doing well. So that's what you really like to see out here, is some different innovations and different takes on the metagame. So we have triple copies of Dark Destroyer, one copy of Dark Eclipser, we have 2 copies of Farm Girl, 1 copy of Forerunner, we have 1 Good Witch with 2 copies of Flip Rider, we have 1 copy of Sword Troopers with 2 copies of Strawman, triple copies of Tin Can, 2 copies of Dark Lady with 1 Wicked Witch, 1 Called by the Grave with triple copies of Emergency Teleport. We have triple copies of Cosmo Town, 1 1-for-1 with your triple copies of Pot of Extravagance for draw power. We have 1 Regeki, 1 Reasoning, 1 Twin Twister, actually value here to discard one of those big ships out of your hand, 2 Back to the Front, your triple copies of Infinite Permanence, and 2 copies of Cosmojo, wrapping up your main deck. Down here in the next deck, we have 1 Lina, we have 1 Lingaribo, we have 1 Unicorn with 1 Nightmare Phoenix, 1 Boral Sword, we have 1 Break Sword with 1 Volcosaurus, we have 1 Gaia Dragon with 1 Gagaga Cowboy, 1 Exciton Knight with 1 Dingrisu, 1 copy of Nova with 1 Infinity, 1 Cyber End Dragon, oh my gosh, shenanigans, and 1 copy of Mega Fleet. And then we have 2 copies of Phantasme, 2 copies of Space Rock, triple Cosmic Cyclone, 2 copies of your Dark Ruler No More, triple copies of Dimensional Barrier, and triple copies of Evenly Matched here, wrapping up probably one of the most interesting fine takes that I have seen within the metagame. And man, anytime you can see Cosmo doing good, I really do like to see that. Like, that is so cool. Next up here is Earthbox. Now, Earth Machine has been one of those decks that I've genuinely enjoyed watching its evolutions kind of go through. Now, the problem with Earthbox at the end of the day is, you know, you're still restricted to playing the deck pretty streamlined. And as much as I want to say, like, I wish the deck wasn't brick, the deck's greatest weakness is still itself at the end of the day. So do kind of keep that in mind. And I mean, this build's actually kind of cool. We're actually teching in the Clockwork Knight here to be able to do some interesting little combo lines with this. So I actually kind of like this. So we have 2 copies of Ash Blossom and Joy Spring, 2 copies of Effect Veiler, we have 1 copy of Aerator with 2 copies of Citadel, we have triple copies of Machina Fortress with triple copies of Gearframe, we also have 1 copy of Metal Cruncher, 1 copy of the Ravager, we have 1 Ruin Force, we have 1 Unclassed Spare, we have 1 Called by the Grave, 2 copies of Clockwork Knight, your triple copies of Machina Redeployment, triple copies of Pot of Extravagance, and 2 copies of Pot of Prosperity. You have lots of filtering options here to be able to get to your outs. We have 2 copies of Infinite Permanence, 1 Overdrive, triple copies of Rivalry of the Warlords, triple copies of Skill Drain, and triple copies of Torrential Tribute here. Down in the next deck, you have triple Cleafort Genius, 2 copies of Juggernaut Libby with 2 Gustav Max, we have 1 Dreadnoid Dreadnought, we have 1 Iron Wolf, triple copies of Gigan X, and triple copies of the big, cool man himself. Then we have 2 copies of Neko Main King, 1 Change of Heart, triple copies of Dark Ruler No More, triple copies of Regeki, triple copies of Twin Twisters, and triple copies of Evenly Matched here. Once again, wrapping up Earth Machine. I mean, obviously putting a 4,500 attack point, 4,600, excuse me, 4,600 attack point monster on the field to press your opponent into a very bad position. This is going to be one of the reasons why this deck is going to functionally do well. And I mean, also being able to power down all your opponent's monsters to make the OTK even easier. It's very, very good. Next up is Dark World Tearlaments. Now, I want to say that I find this deck to be very, very interesting. A lot of the playline methods that we've seen with Dark World as of late have been very, very interesting. Now, I mean, whatever, you know, little extra piece of candy that you want to bring in to the deck is going to be the thing that's going to make or break this effectively. And I will say that for the most part here, lots of real things to consider. I mean, a tier package in your deck can just make your deck a little bit better at the end of the day. So we have triple copies of Genta, Gateman of the Dark World. We have triple copies of Grapha, the Dragon Lord. Then we have one Keldo with one Mudora. Love the one-ofs here. We have 2 copies of Rainbucks, 2 copies of Silva, triple copies of Snow. We have triple copies of Havness, triple copies of Merly. We have 2 copies of Reno Heart, triple copies of Shayren, and we have triple copies of the Salamander Catalyzer. Then we have 2 Dark World Ascension, and then we have 1, I assume that this was puppetry. It looked like it's between, this card in Archives looks the same when it's on a 120p picture. So we put puppetry, but it could be Archives. So we have 1 Instant Fusion with 2 copies of Screech. We have triple Gates of the Dark World and 2 copies of Solik. And down here in the extra, we have 1 Underworld Goddess, 1 Nightmare Phoenix with 1 Appaloosa. We have 1 number 60 with 1 number 41. We have 1 number 22, 1 Giant Trainer, and then we have 1 Abyss Dollar. Then we have 1 Rukalos with 1 Kitgalos. We have 1 Kaleido Heart with 1 Dracostapelia. We have 1 Mudmud, 1 copy of Grapha, and 1 copy of Garuda. Then we have triple copies of Denko Rekka, triple copies of Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries, triple copies of Book of Eclipse, 1 Called by the Grave, your 1 Card Destruction, your 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, and triple copies of good old Deck Devastation Virus here, wrapping up another interesting take for really what you could expect out here for the metagame. Next up here we have Scareclaw with a Kashtira package in it. I love to see what is going on in the world of this deck. It is always very interesting to me, the little things that are moving around in the metagame here to allow something like Scareclaw the real chance to do well. And I will say for the most part that I'm always genuinely intrigued by how Scareclaw is, grasping onto some sort of new advantage tree to try to do well. So, obviously, you still have one of the most devastating, Link 3s in modern era Yu-Gi-Oh! So we have 1 copy of good old Stormwinds, 2 copies of Jerusalem, triple copies of Magna Hut with 1 copy of Illegal Knight. We have 2 copies of Fenrir with 2 copies of Unicorn. We also have triple copies of Acro, triple copies of Astra, triple copies of Balone, and triple copies of Reinhardt. Then we have 1 Vice's Starfrost, 1 Griffin Rider with triple copies of Water Enchantress. We have 1 Dracoback with your 1 Faithful Adventure with 1 Birth, 2 copies of Rectophobia with 2 Rite of Armesier. We have 2 Scareclaw Arrival, triple copies of Airborne Assault. That's interesting. Then we have 1 Splash and 1 Twin Saw. Down here in the extra, you have 1 Underworld Goddess with 2 copies of Triheart, triple copies of Lightheart, 1 Unicorn, 1 IP with 1 Cherubini, 1 Blackluster Soldier, 1 Red Ice Flare Metal, your 2 Big Eye, 1 copy of Shenshin, and 1 Baron DeFleur. Then you have 2 Spooky Dogwood, 1 Wanghu, 2 copies of Book of Eclipse, triple copies of Dark Ruler No More, triple Forbidden Droplet, 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, and triple copies of Evenly Matched here. Wrapping up, none other than Scareclaw Turbo Power. Hey, when you give a deck a good Link 1 here, it was bound to definitely take off and be a heavy rogue contender. And I think a lot of people out here are going to definitely kind of take note of this and go, is this really worth it in the future? I do think so. The last cool deck we have for you is Exosister. I've been waiting to see Exosister do anything. Full disclaimer, I love this deck. I think it's a very cool anti-meta pick, but you have to pick cards that are going to strengthen your matchup and actually make them quote-unquote tolerable at the end of the day. And if you don't really get the chance to make your matchups all the easier, you're going to run into some pretty key issues, which, if the deck fails, what do? So we have triple copies of Ash Blossom and Joy Spring. We have triple copies of Dimension Shifter. We have triple copies of Exosister Ellis. We have 1 copy of Irene with triple copies of Martha. We have 2 copies of Sophia and triple copies of Stella. Then we have 2 Dimensional Fissure with 1 copy of Armament, 1 copy of Carpe Diem, triple copies of Pax. We have 1 Harpy's Feather Duster with 1 Necro Valley. We have triple copies of Pot of Prosperity. We have 1 Zombie World. We have triple copies of Evenly Matched. We have 2 copies of Returnia, 2 copies of Vadas, and triple copies of Infinite Permanence. So in the next deck, we have 1 Sprite Elf. We have 1 Baguski with 1 Gaga Cowboy. We have 2 Magnifica. We have triple copies of Mikhails. We have 2 copies of Caspitiel, 1 copy of Jabrime, 1 copy of Volsophiel. And we have 1 Zeus, 1 Kikalos, and 1 Nobelion. Then we have triple copies of Ghost Reaper, triple copies of Spooky Dogwood, 2 copies of Lightning Storm, triple Dimensional Barrier, 1 Macro, and triple copies of Solemn Judgment here. We're wrapping up, yet again, an interesting chunk of deck profiles for you guys today. So what do you guys think about all of these cool decks? Please leave a comment down below. Tell me what you guys think. I'd like to hear some of your thoughts. And I'll see your beautiful faces back here later in the day, guys. Peace out. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.